Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Richmond Public Schools School Board Budget Work Session. I now call this meeting to order, February the 11th, 2021. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. This meeting is being held as an electronic meeting pursuant to and in compliance with Richmond City Council Ordinance Number 2020-903, adopted April 9th, 2020, and extended by Ordinance Number 2020-183, adopted August 20th, 2020, and by Ordinance Number 2020-232, adopted December the 14th, 2020. And the school board's resolution approved on April 20th, 2020. Simultaneous translation is being provided tonight in Spanish via Zoom, and the meeting notice contained information on how individuals needing translation service could obtain the service. The meeting notice also stated that the meeting would be a virtual meeting and would be live streamed for the public on the school division's Facebook page, and the link was also provided. The agenda of the meeting was posted on board docs. After roll call, we will state how many board members are participating at the time of roll call. Okay. All right. Ms. Dorr. Ms. White.
Yeah, here.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dorr is here. Okay. Ms. White.
Present.
Ms. Gibson.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Present.
Ms. Rizzi.
Here.
Dr. Harris Muhammad. Mrs. Burke.
Here.
Mrs. Page.
Here.
And Mrs. Jones.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum of 8 and you have a call.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collins. We're going to move right along with our agenda, and our purpose tonight is a work session on our budget. Superintendent Cameras, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm delighted tonight to have Mr. Stanley join us to give an update on the latest budgets that have been put forth by both the Senate and the House of Delegates, both of which have some exciting news in them. And I thought it would be helpful for Mr. Stanley to give that overview and then provide answers to any questions you may have. Obviously, things are still in flux, but since they both do offer some good news, I thought it would be helpful for Mr. Stanley to walk you through the details. So with that, Madam Chair, if you are okay, I will pass it over to Mr. Stanley.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cameras. Go right ahead, Mr. Stanley.
Superintendent Cameras, Madam Chair Burke, and members of the board. I'm very happy to give you a legislative update tonight. Yesterday, the House and Senate, the budget committees, the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee, both released their budget proposals for the for the rest of this biennium. They were delayed from originally releasing those budgets on Sunday. Given the special session and a little bit more time, they decided to push that off a few days so that they could ensure that they had well thought out budget proposals. Both of the budget proposals go above and beyond what the governor had proposed for education funding over the rest of the biennium. The Senate proposal, RPS would receive about $3.7 million of additional funding in FY22. This funding is broken out primarily among, it is 3 different streams. One of them is the proposal that was part of the SOQ recommendations to create a new category of support staff called specialized support positions. This is nurses, behavior analysts, psychologists, some of our more specialized support staff, and would fund them at a rate of 3 staff per 1,000 students. RPS would receive about $1.1 million in funding for those positions going into FY22. There's also a per pupil allocation to continue to support the division with our enrollment loss and learning loss, as well as just COVID relief. I apologize. I seem to hear the interpreter.
Yes, we're having,
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Ed, that's quite all right. Ed, that's quite all right. And let the record show also, please forgive me, Matthew. Dr. Harris Muhammad has joined us as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Harris Muhammad. Appreciate you being here. Our thoughts are with you. Thank you. Go right ahead, Mr. Stanley. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So back to the learning loss, COVID relief, that is a per pupil allocation, and RPS would receive about $1.2 million in that funding in FY22. And then as far as teacher salaries, the Senate is proposing a 3% salary increase for FY22. That would give RPS about $1.45 million. That raise is specific to FY22. So to pull down the full 3% of salary increase, RPS would have to match that full 3%. So that's in the Senate. The House, we did get an update today with distribution tables for the House. And I'm very pleased to share that in their proposal, RPS would receive approximately $4.4 million within this current fiscal year in FY21, and we would receive another $3.5 million in FY22. In FY21, it is that $3.4 million is also for learning loss for extended school year, summer school. That is distributed on the at-risk add-on formula. So that is very much the best equity-based funding formula the state has right now. And so RPS stands to benefit significantly under that learning loss funding that would be distributed to Richmond. And then the other main piece of funding that comes with the House proposal is a 5% salary increase. And that is about $3.5 million that we would receive for that in FY22. That 5% salary increase, however, has a bit more flexibility. The district would not have to raise a full 5% in FY22. It would be a full 5% over the biennium. So a couple little nuances to those match rates and how salaries would pull down those matching funds. That is the majority of the update that I wanted to share with you tonight. I'm happy to dive into any of those topics with further detail. And let's see if there's already a question. So Ms. Burke, I'll turn it back over to you.
Mr. Stanley, thank you so very much. That news you just shared is absolutely excellent. And this is perfect timing for us as well as we are discussing the budget. Colleagues, we will continue as we normally do. Mr. Young will let me know who's up to speak. We want to hear from everyone. So I ask that everyone give everybody a chance to ask all the questions that we need to and then some. And at some point, I will also call on each one as I see you on the screen. But thank you so very much. Mr. Young, whom do we have?
Ms. Dorr.
All right.
Thank
and
you.
After that, that's it? I'm sorry, Ms. Dorr is the only person?
So far, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Go right ahead, Ms. Dorr.
I see Ms. Page after me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stanley, great news about the raise. Wondering the 5%, is it if it's over the biennium, is that 2% and or 2.5% and 2.5%? And does that require a local match? If so, could you remind us approximately how much the local match portion of this would be?
Absolutely, Ms. Stewart. As far as when if there's a breakdown as far as the percentage of when the raises have to go out, it's actually up to the division. We have flexibility during which part of the biennium we want to give that 5% raise. So RPS did a raise last year and that counts towards that 5%. And then whatever additional up to the 5%, we would get that state matching funds for. As far as the specific amount of state matching funds, I think because RPS also provides raises typically to all staff, I think we've typically estimated that the ratio is about 1/3 to 2/3. The state provides us about 1/3 of the funding, and then RPS is at the locality level, we have to contribute about 2/3 to that.
Ms. Dorr, you're done?
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, please, go right ahead.
So last year's raise counts, would this year and next year count as well, or could we do a full 5% this year? Just trying to understand the time a little bit.
So let me explain just a bit about the biennium. Very good question. The state operates on a 2-year budget cycle. And so we are at the end, we are in the second part of that 2-year budget cycle. The state has the ability to continue to modify what happens up until June 30th. They call it a caboose budget. But usually the greater amount of changes would be in the second year. Because the state operates on this biennial budget, it's all one document. So again, it completely depends on the language that they specifically put in that budget amendment as far as how it's going to end up being required of school divisions to match, to provide that raise and to receive those matching funds.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Dorr. Ms. Page?
Yes, thank you, Matthew. That is great news. So I'm going to send my questions in the chat because I meant to send them before, because I think it's helpful if we can, just in lieu of the time constraints that we have, if we could send questions beforehand. But anyway, so this is my question to you. Do we have any patrons or support to revisit the lottery reallocation of funds to support the SOQs at risk funding? Because we know that the lottery proceeds, localities only receive less than 50% of the proceeds. Is that correct?
I can't speak to that specific percentage.
Okay,
I'm
so,
happy to follow up with that, Ms. Page.
okay, all right, so that's my question, because if we have received X amount of dollars from lottery funding, is this something that the General Assembly may be willing to revisit? So I'll put that in the chat so you can follow up with that. And then my next question regarding state funding. I know we probably have done this before, and this is always a good exercise to inform the board as well as inform the public regarding the state funding, maybe since, and I'm just saying 2008 at the level that, recession, to see how the state funding has been in alignment to support localities, and so that we can really have a clear picture how the state funding has been lagging behind and not really up to par to support public education. And this is something that we can, as we move forward with our advocacy plan, to really have a clear picture how state funding really they need to step their game up. So I know that's not something you can do tonight, but if it's the will of the board, and I personally think that it'll be worth seeing that information as we move forward with advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Thank you. Mr. Young,
Ms. White?
followed by,
Good evening, Mr. Stanley. I just have a quick, I want you to clarify something. I didn't quite understand you. You said on the SOQ, you just said 3 staffs per 1,000 students?
Yes, Mrs. White, that is the ratio at which the General Assembly would be funding these specialized support positions. This is not all support positions. This is some of the ones that are a bit more specialized, like our nurses, like our behavior analysts, like psychologists, those positions that do provide that higher level of support to our students.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I would also, just to follow up just a bit to Mrs. Page, if that's all right. I can certainly look in a little bit deeper at the question about lottery funds and how those have been used this year. I will have to dig into the numbers a bit more for that.
Okay.
But what I would love to share is, and I don't know if everyone has seen it yet, but yesterday, Governor Northam released the second report on systemic bias in Virginia law. And so within that report, there is a whole section about education, and several of those recommendations that are in that report really tie to equity-based funding. And so I know that we continue to talk about the at-risk add-on program or the use of lottery funds, but that report actually specifically calls out the local composite index, which we have all been talking about for many years, as a real problem in terms of equitable distribution of education funding across our state. And I think that we've seen some progress this year with the General Assembly continuing to recognize equity. You see that in the House's proposal for the COVID relief and learning loss. But I think that, you know, the General Assembly has a commission on school construction that's forthcoming. The work of this other governor's commission on systemic bias is undergoing. And I think that over the next couple of years, there's a lot of pressure building for a closer look at the underlying education funding formulas that we've been continuing to talk about. And so I think that as we move forward with our advocacy, we hope that we can continue to address those underlying funding formula issues.
Thank you so much. I see Mr. Young, I see the superintendent listed. Is
Yes.
there anyone else?
Not as
Superintendent
of yet.
Smith?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Cameras?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stanley, could you just provide for the board an overview of what happens next and what the timeline is?
Absolutely. So now that these budgets have been released, they've been released by a committee. They do still have to be passed by their respective chambers. It is almost always assumed that the budgets will pass the respective chambers, although there is often some discussion about specific amendments that will happen on the floor. And further minor changes can happen, but typically on the floor, they don't make major changes because it would just skew all the numbers and they'd have to go back to the drawing board altogether. But once each chamber passes their respective budget, then it goes over to the other side. And at that point, conferees are appointed. And there's typically 6 senators and 6 delegates that form a budget conference committee. And it is up to those 12 senators, those 12 members of the General Assembly to negotiate what the final budget is. So while, you know, the House proposal with about $8 million in new funding is amazing, and the Senate has 4, which will really support us next year, it's likely that there is going to be some compromise in the middle. To be seen over, you know, do they agree on the at-risk add-on funding of the learning loss, or do they do the per pupil allocation? And then with the staff increases, do they just do 4%, or do they say, well, we're going to do just a flat 3% in FY21, but we're also going to recognize any salary increases that happen in in the FY21. I meant before FY22, but you understand what I mean, and that they do have a lot of negotiating points between these two proposals. And especially with the difference in approach with the specialized student support positions in the Senate, that's a pretty big item that would have to be absorbed by the House, and the House is already spending more money, so it's unlikely that they'd be able to fund that. So they have a little bit of juggling to do over what their priorities will be, and that will play out over about 2 to 3 weeks. By the end, or probably by Monday, the House and Senate will have voted on the budget, and then it will be in kind of a form of limbo until those conferees agree on a final budget. And then, of course, both houses have to then fully vote on those, but that's usually a formality after the conferees agree.
Excellent. Again, that is great, great, great news. Thank you so much. And I'm thinking back, if I may, regarding what Ms. Page asked as well. From what I understood, Ms. Page, and Mr. Stanley, correct me if I'm off track, that when the lottery was originally put in place, the General Assembly then was in full support of continuing to fund us as well as get the lottery funds. Then as the General Assembly changed, money was redirected, but we still continue to get money from the lottery, but it just filled in the gaps per se, and General Assembly didn't. So I'm so glad. It's unfortunate with all the pandemics we have going on right now, that certain things have really been brought to folk attention. So I'm so delighted that we're dealing with the equity piece as well as just having a fair opportunity for our students across the board. So this is excellent, excellent news. And I thank you, Mr. Stanley. You are awesome with the General Assembly, and we thank you for speaking on behalf of every child. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it greatly. I've seen him in action there. He's excellent. Thank you. Keep the money flowing and the support. All right, Mr. Cameron, you want to continue, or do we have any more questions? Mr. Young, any more questions?
No, ma'am.
All right. Mr.
Thank you, Madam.
Cameron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we will work with Mr. Stanley to identify any potential adjustments to our budget based on this recent information, and we'll keep the board up to date as things progress. Now we'd like to turn to the next part of our discussion of the federal stimulus. We have the academic portion and the social and emotional learning portion to review tonight. So I will begin with our academic portion and turn it over to Dr. Epp. And Dr. Epp, if you'd like, I can share my screen for you if you would like that.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. Give me 1 second here.
Okay, good evening, Madam Chair
I'm sorry for
Burke.
backing up. Just real quick, one note: we're going to skip the extended year piece of this, as that is an entirely separate conversation. We really want to dig into all of the other aspects that we haven't had a chance yet to discuss. So just wanted to give that clarification. All right,
Thank you.
Dr. Rett.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Madam Chair Burke, Vice Chair Young, school board members. So I'll take you briefly through each of these items and then take questions. Starting with our summer support for pre-K-12 and ESL and exceptional education. While we do have other funds allocated through grant dollars and such, given how much we know we want to provide students in the summer, we've allocated an additional $800,000. If we happen to be in person, this would certainly provide funding for that. If we are virtual, it will provide funding for that. We, in short, plan to provide summer programming for students, and in particular for this population of students, but other students who may need academic support and remediation, as well as high school students who may need credit recovery. And so these funds will use to provide summer programming, whether that is in the virtual form or in the in-person form. This will also include enrichment funds to support our partnership with enrichment providing organizations such as the YMCA, Next Up, et cetera. Next, we are seeking to add reading specialists to our schools. These are school-based positions, and we do receive some funds from the state to offset this cost. So we get a lot more reading specialists given that state initiative. And our goal is to have a reading specialist in every school, actually 2 at least, because our reading specialists serve either as a reading coach where they work primarily with teachers. They may provide some student support, but primarily they work building teacher capacity in reading instruction. And then reading interventionists who work with our students who need the most support in literacy. So we currently have about approximately between specialists, coaches, and interventionists. We have about 45 in our schools. And so our goal is to continue to increase this number until each school has at least 2 specialists, particularly given our focus on literacy. This also includes funds to support teacher credentialing, teachers who are interested in getting their reading specialist endorsement. This includes funds for us to continue a new cohort through our partnership with UVA for teachers who want to pursue that credential. The next line, continuing with our literacy theme, is to add a special instructional specialist for secondary reading. And we are very, whenever we think about central office positions, we certainly want to be very disciplined, but we know that we need to provide support and guidance to the people we add at the school levels. We currently have 1 person serving all of 612 in the literacy area, and that's really insufficient for supporting both middle school teachers, coaches, and interventionists, as well as high school. So the idea here is to add a dedicated specialist for our high schools. That would all be for FY22 expenditures. For our current year expenditures, because we want to get out ahead of ordering, we would use these funds to supplement the ELA and reading materials for our curriculum. In particular, we provide class sets, individual student sets to every student K-12 for the actual literature and books that students use throughout their ELA instruction. And so this can range from a text set per kid from 8 titles, 4 titles to up to 8 titles. But the idea here is that every year students get these as their own, so they can mark them up, they can take them home, and they can build their own home library. They don't just have to leave it in the classroom. In addition, for our high school, so what I just spoke to was K-8. For our high school, we also have what's called anchor texts. And so each grade level has at least 4 sets of 4 texts or novels that go with the high school ELA curriculum. And so this would allow us to make sure every classroom has class sets and then some, so that so teachers do not have to make copies or anything like that. And then lastly, around books for reading, when we closed last spring, we really wanted students to take home books and not have to worry about having things to read. And so we encourage schools and ask schools to distribute books to students without fear of those not being returned. And we didn't want students or parents to have to worry about paying fines for books that may not have been returned. So we committed to principals to backfill those books. And so this will allow us to buy more books to replace those in the spring. And just as a connection, our operating budget also includes historically and continues this year with $250,000 for library books as well. So that this would be a total investment of $550,000 on library books this year. Moving on to math, similar to our reading support, we currently have one person K-12 who supports math intervention. And with just 50% of our students passing the SOL, we know that we have a number of students at the secondary level that have great potential in math, but need targeted support. And we have math interventionists at our schools. And so this role will do all the work around working with teachers to select our math interventions, to implement our math interventions, provide training, progress monitoring with data, and modeling for teachers how to utilize our intervention programs so that teachers are not having to, in addition to core instruction, come up with intervention work themselves. For science, the state has adopted new science standards. And so it is time to update our science curriculum K-12. We have high school earmarked because we do have dollars in our textbook budget for science curricula, but we know that high school science tends to be more expensive. And we want to make sure we also have some funds, not just for curricula, but also for any high need lab supplies and such, to make sure that the curriculum can be sufficiently hands-on and experiment based. For our schools for ESL, we've continued every year to add to our roster of ESL teachers as our student population requiring English language services grows. And so based on our projections, we'd like to add another 8 ESL teachers. Another thing to note here is while the state also offsets the cost of each additional ESL teacher with additional funds based on our ESL reporting. So we are able to get more teachers for less money. So that's why you see 8 teachers here for a little bit of a less cost than a full-time teacher would be. In addition, we've grown over the last 3 years, we have grown our ESL teacher cohort significantly, and we want to make sure that those teachers have support. And so we're looking to add a specialist who can provide, again, training and support to ESL teachers. provide professional development, observations, and coaching, peer feedback. This is not supervision feedback. This is purely a peer support role. Additionally, we need to make sure that we're training school staff on effectively administering placement assessments such as the WIDA, making sure that our data is reported on time, and so that we are really monitoring the progress of our students who are English language learners. Next, in continuing with support for our English language learners, we would like to expand the Newcomer Academy. The Newcomer Academy is a program we began this year to serve high school students who are new to the country, who've been here less than a year and are at a very early level of English language proficiency, and or who have had very limited formal secondary schooling, or who have had their schooling interrupted. We currently serve 9th and 10th graders in this program, and we would like to expand this program to middle school newcomers. This program is currently housed at George Wythe High School. Additionally, our Conganas program is a program for our English language learners who are overaged, undercredited. And as students might come to us at 16 or 17 without any high school credits, we know that a traditional 4-year high school experience is likely not going to be the best path for success. And so the Conganas Academy works to help students accelerate their high school studies so that they can graduate within a reasonable amount of time. We would like to expand this program to also serve middle school age students who may be overage, undercredited, so that they are going into high school not so far behind in terms of their age versus credits. And then lastly, we want to continue to invest in our interpretation services so that families have access, regardless of home language, to any information that we are sharing as a school district. In exceptional education, we are also seeking to add 5 school-based positions. These are instructional compliance coordinators. Not every school has an ICC. And when a school does not have an ICC, that means that burden or that responsibility falls on top of assistant principals who are already overburdened, or our teachers, our exceptional education teachers who already have a caseload. So our ICCs ensure they manage the referral and evaluation process when a student is referred for special education, to make sure we do that in a timely manner. They ensure that IEP meetings are scheduled in an appropriate manner. They work with the school staff to partner with families to make sure that IEP meetings are done effectively and in partnership with families. They monitor our major exceptional education data and our what we call our school counts, which ensures that we receive adequate funding at the federal level. When that data is not correct, that impacts our budget. And so again, every school should have an ICC. Some schools may only need a part-time, but the addition here gets us pretty close to where we need to be so that every school has a dedicated ICC, even if part-time. Some schools may only need part-time if they have a very small exceptional education enrollment or are a small school. Similarly, we currently have 20 school psychologists, and unfortunately, the bulk of their time is currently dedicated to educational diagnostics, i.e. Evaluating students for referrals to exceptional education. So we want to try a new model here where we add some capacity that is purely dedicated to educational evaluation for exceptional education, to free up some of our school psychologists' time to provide other mental health services to students in our buildings. And then lastly, in exceptional education, we have, in response to COVID-19, we've worked hand in hand with our related services partners to provide many services to students at home, be that occupational therapy, physical therapy, hearing for services for the hearing impaired, or for our visually impaired students that who really cannot do school online. We've assistive audio technology. This covers our actual expenses in response to these additional services. In terms of the next area is our alternative education programs. We've talked, this board has talked about alt ed for some time, and we're looking to really ramp up our programs here. We started the Secondary Success Center a year ago and would like to continue to expand that work that's a dropout recovery program. So bringing students back who have previously dropped out and showing them a path to a high school graduation, a high school diploma, but also working to establish a program for our younger students where they can learn skills to manage behavioral issues. So really alternatives to long-term suspensions, but also students get instruction and trauma-informed practices to help them be successful when they are back in their traditional school. This program also includes, this would also include the creation of a new program for, we haven't decided on a cool name yet, but an evening school. So one of the things we've heard from our high school students and families, particularly those who may need to work, that, there's no reason high school needs to be from 8 to 3. Could we not do an evening school for students who may have to work during the day? We've gotten this feedback quite significantly over the past few years from our schools on the South Side. And so this would establish a high school program on a different schedule. And then finally, we would establish an alternative to in-school suspension. So where, again, students are learning skills and going through restorative practices so that students, we don't have the same students sort of repeating the same mistakes or issues, and we're really giving them the services they need. And then I'll share, given that we do have some existing programs in place, such as Aspire and the Performance Learning Center, this plan includes streamlining all of our credit recovery or credit accelerations programs. So rather than having 2 or 3 of the same type of programs under a different name, we would be streamlining programs such as Aspire and PLC. And I'll try to be quick so I can make time for questions. For preschool, we want to augment our curriculum supports. We do have a curriculum, it's called Creative Curriculum, but this would allow us to access the online version of curriculum supports, given that our pre-K students will have one-to-one devices. We can really provide students more one-to-one time and by accessing digital curriculum. And this will also provide needed classroom supplies for teachers at the preschool to implement their curriculum. We also want to make sure that we are doing significant outreach to all of our families, regardless of home language, and in particular, our Spanish-speaking families. So we want to invest some specific dollars in marketing for preschool enrollment. And a few others. For middle school, we'd like to continue to add middle school teachers to ensure we're able to offer the same slate of electives across our middle schools. Additionally, we will be moving all of our middle schools to all but 3 are currently on a double math, double English block, which we know is needed given what our students need in math and literacy. And so this will enable us to make that change across all of our middle schools. The line we have here for Edgenuity, SAT, PSAT, and other assessments. Edgenuity is an online curriculum that we use we've used for some time, for even prior to COVID, for students who may need to take a class online because it doesn't fit their schedule, students who may take a class for credit recovery. And this is the program that is used by all of our secondary credit recovery programs. The SAT and PSAT, we provide that for every student in RPS in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade take the PSAT and the SAT in 11th grade. And then this plays for our Performance Matters assessment system. These are expenses that are not new. In full candor, these are items that have historically been not budgeted and have been paid for through other funds that may have been over budgeted. So if the board members who were here in the previous budget cycle, we brought this to the budget last year and it was cut. But the previous years, this might have been our advanced program budget line was very large. We've since gotten that in line with actual expenditures because expenditures like this was coming out of that line or was coming out of a textbook line. So this reflects actual expenditures, not new expenditures. And then lastly, two things. We want to expand our instructional Amazon cards to our instructional assistants. This will give our instructional assistants a $100 supply card that they can use however they want for their classrooms. And finally, given this spring, we've already begun doing this work this winter. This is SOL testing for in-person. This covers proctors, security staff, transportation, PPE, etc. And so with that, I will pause.
Thank you, Dr. Epp. This is excellent information. Mr. Young, I do have a comment listed as well, but I'll be last. Do we have anyone listed to ask questions?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Harris Muhammad, then Miss Page.
All right, Dr. Harris Muhammad.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Dr. Epp, can you share with us why it is necessary to have a reading specialist at the central office level when the need is in the building level? In that explanation, can you also provide what area in the strategic plan does it justify adding another central office level in the area of math and reading? Along with that, board members, this is a comment that I really would like for us to consider this. It is critically important. We have several central office possessions under the Department of Instruction that overlap. They overlap with duties, they overlap with the purpose, they overlap with what they're asked to do in their, according to the certified positions that the superintendent sent to us around January the 15th through board docs. When I categorize every specialist, every director position and manager position in the Department of Instruction, there are some concerns. So what I would like to do, what I would recommend, is that we take a deep dive in the Department of Instruction. That's just one area where we can save monies. Those monies then can be reallocated to those 17 additional custodial positions, additional math and full-time specialist positions, and additional EL and specialist coaches positions if we are really talking about academic equity. Here's another comment. One interventionist cannot train all math teachers effectively. So why not put the interventionist, if it's math, reading, science, it doesn't matter the content area. The main support of creating those positions based on research is to add support to teachers so they can plan effectively to teach. They do not do that from central office. So using the data that I asked for the benchmark data for 2019 and, the latter part of 2018 and the early part of 2019, we have to use data to guide our decision-making as well as instruction. So use the data from the schools to determine where the interventionists can be. They cannot move instruction effectively from central office. They have to be able to be at arm's reach to the teachers so they can effectively train the teachers to support students with instruction. Lastly, what type of curriculum, this is for preschool, what type of curriculum supports will be implemented and who will monitor the data and implementation for the preschool curriculum? Do we have someone that is certified that can do that? And if not, how are we going to do that? And Dr. F, I know that was a lot of questions, but when we're talking about instruction and curriculum and assessment, that is one of the attributes together as a trio that drives instruction, that drives accreditation in a division besides policy. So please be able to, if you can't answer any of those tonight, I'll look for those answers within the next 2 days. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris Mohammed, for your questions. I always appreciate questions about instruction. So I'll start with your last one first and then try to work my way backwards. For pre-K, the curriculum supports is, there are two parts. One is to fund the online aspect of the creative curriculum program. That's our adopted curriculum for preschool. And to continue utilizing that tool post-COVID, as we've received great feedback from that, and to provide classroom materials. The pre-K curriculum is naturally very hands-on, has different outdoor activities and the like. And so wanting to make sure that no preschool, every preschool teacher has access to those supplies in their classroom. In terms of monitoring that, we do have a person who supports our principals who is instructionally certified. And we also have our preschool principals who will do that with our teachers. In terms of the broader questions, I take very seriously how important it is to streamline central office functions. And we've streamlined the academic office quite significantly, but we have had areas where the district has had underinvestment. For example, 3 years ago, there was not one single person who was in charge of there was one person in charge of all K-12 ELA. And I would say that if you look at the results, our results speak to not a division-wide strategy, but kind of a let's see what happens strategy. And so most school systems that are trying to drive progress across every single school and have a division-wide strategy absolutely has to live at the school level. But there is a role that central office plays in providing guidance, support, professional development, developing tools and resources, training principals, training coaches, training interventionists. And I would agree, we do not have a central-based interventionist. Interventionists work directly with students. But as we make these investments at the school level, to have one person who supports all of high school ELA. So that seems reasonable that a school system would have one person who ensures that teachers facilitates working with teacher leaders to have a curriculum guide every year, a pacing guide, developing or reviewing, monitoring the interim assessments. Someone has to create those interim assessments and put them in our assessment platform. Someone needs to actually analyze that data and set up protocols to analyze that data, and work with we have teacher leaders that are called academic architects. Those are teacher leaders that we bring together to facilitate the teacher voice in this work. And also we have instructional leads at every campus. And our instructional specialists at the division office meet every week with those instructional specialists to help them go through these things. And I think most of our teachers, I think, would say that their specialists are so valuable because they are not in an evaluative role. They are purely in a support role. And I would certainly ask, to about the strategic plan, 1.2 is all about, 1.2 and 1.3 is all about literacy. And we have a big goal to ensure literacy across our school division, and to ensure accreditation, which absolutely is tied directly to academic outcomes. We have a goal to increase proficiency rates. We have an action to decrease gaps in subgroups. And so these positions directly reflect the priorities in the strategic plan. And I would welcome a question about, I'd welcome more opportunity to talk with you about duplicative roles. I do not believe that there are duplicative functions. There are roles that may have the same title. That doesn't mean they're doing the same work. That just means they're at the same level, but they have a separate set of responsibilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harris Muhammad and Dr. Epp. I think Ms. Page is next, and then Ms. White.
So my question is for the administration. This is something they can, because I know they're not prepared tonight. So bringing back the information back at the next budget work session regarding the ESL support.
Ms. Page, do you want to ask your question? I believe Dr. Epp might be able to respond.
Okay, so my question is, what has been the incremental change to date for our ESL support, as it relates to the FTEs under your leadership?
Thank you. So we've added, in terms of teachers, over the last 3 years, we've added at least 8 teachers per year. So with this would be an additional approximately 24. I may be off by 1 or 2 there. We had 1 person for the entire division who supported ESL. When we came into this role, we were under a Title III corrective action plan. So in addition to our corrective action plan for the division at large, we also had a Title III corrective action plan, also a Title I corrective action plan for federal funding. For compliance, we were under corrective action for identifying students, monitoring students, assessing students, and providing services. And we'll get an official update at our next CAP meeting, but we have almost completely closed out that CAP because of the work we've done over the last 3 years. And specifically, I think the board might recall a couple of years ago, the division was even undercounting and under identifying students who were receiving ESL services. Now, thank goodness they were receiving services. The teachers, it was our teachers who were giving the services, but the students weren't being reflected in the count, which meant we were losing funding. So we've spent the last couple of years really shoring up all of the compliance work where we have confidence that we know where every single ESL student is, that they're appropriately tested, placed, and receiving services. And then we've since built ESL support programs across the division, including coming out of our high school transcript audit, reworking the whole ESL high school experience, and some other things. So we have a lot more work to do. Not saying we are by any stretch where we need to be, but I do feel proud of the progress and the investments this board has made in our ESL support. And I hope the board has seen that pay off, and hope the board will continue to invest in those supports.
So follow-up question, Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
So this work, as it relates to the budget, is critical to support these budgetary items, as it will help with the corrective action plan and our memorandum of understanding, correct? Dr. L?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. White?
Hi, Dr. Epps, how are you? And I'm going to try to ask all my questions.
Oh, Ms. White, I think you just went
Ms.
on
White,
mute.
can't hear you. Can't hear you, dear. Ms. White?
Hi, Dr. Epps.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, there you
Oh,
go.
hi. I'm going to try to ask all my questions at one time. I was looking at your first slide and you had 10 new reading specialists. And it just brought to my attention, since we were we were talking about students that were left behind, why the number 10 came up. And my other question was, I think I saw on one of the slides about the reading material for the ELA curriculum. And I wanted to know who chose those particular reading material. And if it's standard, I wanted to know why the actual teachers weren't allowed to choose the novels, since they are the ones who align their SOLs with those novels. And the other thing I wanted to know is, why aren't the novels electronics? Because it looked like we're spending a lot of money on books. And I know I got quite a few here at my home with 2 boys. So I just want to know why we are spending so much money on books when they could be electronic. And my other question is, I'm really concerned about the alternative school education program. And I just wanted to know, I know you said something about Spartan Academy, and I know we pay quite a bit of money for that program itself. So I wanted to know, why isn't this type of program already implemented inside of Spartan Academy now? I know you said something about in-school suspension, and I wanted to know, why wasn't this already implemented? It seems like it would be implemented now to me. It's not that it's a lot of students that is overwhelming in that school. So why haven't this program been implemented? And my last question is, what percentage of students use the class recovery? Because I see a lot of money going to that also. That's my last question.
Thank you, Ms. White, for those questions. So for the reading specialists, I would love to overnight wave a magic wand and hire 30. I think one, if we could afford that, that'd be great. But there's also a supply problem. Reading specialists are hard to come by, and we also want to grow our own. So we currently have a cohort of teachers who we're paying for them to get their reading specialist credential. We'll do another cohort. It's a lot of work. So it's about 5 teachers. And so this is the number where we think we can get the combination of where we've been able to grow our own, as well as recruit and be able to hire. But I think it's our belief that it doesn't make a lot of sense to have money in a budget for a position to sit vacant. And so 10 seems to be the number we can bring on each year as we're building up that. So that's the thinking on the number 10. On the books are determined based on our curriculum. We have a K-8 curriculum, so it is aligned over K-8. And one of the reasons we have a K-8 curricula is if everything was individually at every classroom different, you can ask a lot English teacher when you've sat down to read your favorite book with your kiddos and they say, oh, we read that last year. That's sort of the most basic, but really our curriculum has been developed. It's actually the most widely used ELA curriculum in the country. It is highly regarded, and it is aligned to the level of thinking that we want our students to have. And that comes with the books already selected. And the thinking is, rather than teachers spending time hunting down books and creating lessons from scratch, we think it's better for our teachers to spend time thinking about what do my students here need and how do I make this lesson come alive to them. So our whole curriculum model is built on making sure that we don't have gaps or redundancies in our curricula. And the reason we chose to go with hard copies instead of electric copies, you're right, it could definitely save some money. And in fact, we actually had some e-versions earlier this year because there were some very real shipping delays due to COVID. And while that worked for virtual learning, it would require, because our curriculum, students are in the book constantly, they should be, and they should be reading and writing and marking up the text. If we only had e-versions, I feel like students would just be on the computer all the time. But lastly, I think it's our belief, and certainly mine, that there's something really powerful in holding a book. And I know I like many of our students do not have a home library. And growing up without books in your home, I know what that was like. And there's something really powerful about having a book that you can call your own. And so that's some of the reason why it is a big investment. You're absolutely right. But we think what better investment than the joy of reading. On the Spartan Academy, so right now the Spartan Academy is one program inside of RAS, the Richmond Alternative School. But RAS also includes Aspire. So Spartan is for students who have been placed there due to significant long-term behavioral infractions, with the idea that they would eventually go back to their home school. Aspire is also under RAS, and that is a credit recovery program. That is very similar to PLC. And you're correct, that's lived over at the Richmond Technical Center. And there's no reason those two programs should be different. That's an example of redundancy. As Dr. Harris Muhammad pointed out, we should be looking for redundancy. And that's an example of where we don't need two programs doing the same thing. So we can streamline there. And so these other programs, they just haven't been developed. And these programs will require school-based staff. So the budget for these programs really is direct funds for teachers and instructional staff to support students in these programs. And I can provide a detailed budget for that at the next session. We actually wanted to do a whole deep presentation on alt ed at an upcoming board meeting, so you all can see all the different pieces. And then on credit recovery, I can get you that exact number, but that line item includes 4 big things, and we can provide you that breakdown. I can get you that breakdown across that line item.
Dr. App?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that the last one? The last?
Yes, did you hear I said I can get the breakdown of?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
I did.
I think that was all of them. Was that all of them, Ms. White?
Yes, that you answered them all well, except one of them I'm still hesitant about, but.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
We'll come back to you, Ms. White. Thank you so much. Mr. Young, who's our next?
Miss Rizzi, then Miss Jones.
All right, it's Rizzi and then Ms. Jones. All right, Ms. Rizzi, floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. I hope my internet is, my internet's been kind of sketchy tonight, so hopefully it works. So I do have a few questions specifically about the interventionalist. I would like to know how that works. I'd like a little more information about it. When you talk about taking planning out of the hands of teachers, of course, I get nervous about that. As an English teacher who loves novels and loves teaching novels, part of my creativity came into play when I was able to create lessons that I felt brought those novels alive. And I actually really love, and I currently love, having the leeway to design my own, plans for that, how to do that, how to achieve that. And so, I think our teachers are wonderful and professionals, and many of them have advanced degrees and can, do most of their own planning. So I always do get worried when we talk about like making plans for teachers, especially at the secondary level. But no shade to the elementary people too. I mean, they probably love planning as equally. Many of them do, I'm sure. As far as the interventionalists, they are secondary, is that correct?
We have interventionists K-12.
Oh, it's interventionist. Okay, I wrote it down wrong. Okay, so the ones you're proposing to add I wrote it down as though they were secondary. You're also proposing to add some.
Oh, I'm sorry. To clarify, we're proposing to add a secondary support position for secondary interventionists. So we have interventionists at school that are dedicated. We have about 50 between ELA and math. So we have about 25 of them for math, and they currently do not have a central support who can provide them the training support and go-to and observation and coaching that is pretty to make sure that they have what they need, because they are full-time interventionists. They're not full-time classroom teachers.
Right. And have they asked for this? From what you can tell, have they asked for a central office person?
Well, our teachers asked for support, and this is how we would provide it. So the support they've asked for: training, feedback on implementation, targeted PD that's specific to their role. Those are the things that they've asked for.
And they have not been getting them by way of the interventionists.
Sorry, the interventionists are the staff at the school.
They're teachers. Is that what?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's a
you
teaching
said at
role.
first they weren't teachers.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
It's a teaching role. So we have dedicated interventionists who are certified teachers, but they have a very special assignment to work directly with tier 2 and tier 3 interventions in either literacy or math. And we have, but as we've built that out at the secondary level, they do not have a person to support all of that work. And so we need someone to do that. This person also provides, and again, aggregates data, looks at, analyzes the data, identifies trends with the teachers, all the things that you all ask us for. We want to provide that, but people have to provide that. And this is, I would just say, having a central support person to implement a division-wide strategy, to me, is not excessive. It's sort of to make sure that those interventionists are actually successful. So that's the thinking.
So these interventionists at this time have no supervisor?
Well, their principal at their school is their formal supervisor. This is meant to, like many central office roles, meant to be that lateral support and guide, that person you go to that you don't have to, that you can go to and ask anything to.
Okay.
Sorry, that was confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I still would like to probably see some kind of chart.
Sure.
Just to have an idea of how that works.
Absolutely.
RPS reads, that program got cut. Is this something that we're going to do again or revive?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with RPS.
The RPS reads one book.
Oh, one book. That's at the elementary level.
Yeah.
That's a partnership with Read to Them. We have not cut that program. We did
it's put on hold
this past year in the fall. We put that on hold. We had some concerns about the book selection. Our teachers and principals were not involved in the book selection. And so we put that on hold. And In fact, I was just talking with a city librarian last night about this very issue. But there is a fall event planned, and the students are reading The Trumpet of the Swan.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was read maybe 8 to 10 years ago.
Okay.
It has been a one read before.
Yes.
Let's see. Question about the ICCs. Are there still building level resource teachers, and do these ICCs work with them?
By resource teachers, do you mean
Support.
exceptional education teachers that have a
Yes.
small group?
Yes.
So where necessary, although our model has shifted rather significantly to a inclusion-based, collaborative, teaching-based model, but where required, there are certainly that type of small group pullout, if you will. ICCs at most schools do not have teaching responsibilities because the load, they're responsible for every compliance for every student in the building. At smaller schools, they may have a teaching assignment or two, depending on how big the load is at the school.
Okay. And then I'm happy to hear that psychologists may at some point be freed up to do mental health work with our students. I hope that you guys take that goal very seriously and get that in place as soon as possible. It's something we've been missing for a very long time.
Yes.
And there was one other. I didn't see anything budgeted for like increased electives at the middle and high school level. Is this something that we're just not thinking about right now?
The middle school teachers, the 7 additional middle school teachers, some of those positions, we're in the process of doing evaluating leveling in terms of against enrollment. But we have those 7 in there, some of which may be used for electives.
Okay. And then one last, the SOL support that you provide schools, evidently I understand that that doesn't happen for children who are attending like Maggie Walker Governor's School or Code RVA, yet their data goes into like our data, our RPS data. And so is there ever a thought of supporting them with, helping pay for SOL and, testing?
Are you talking about like study sessions or?
Yeah, support for them.
That hasn't been brought to my attention before. I'm happy to find ways that we could provide tutoring if need be. I do know that our Code RVA students have been part of our AP study sessions that we have every spring on Saturdays. So I do know that students have participated in that, but we could certainly make that available.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, and Ms. Rizzi, one small thing, I want to make sure I didn't misspeak. I certainly would never want to take planning out of the hands of teachers. So that's definitely not the intent or goal of our curricula. It's to provide a consistent framework. And I know the high school teachers feel strongly about their books. Unfortunately, up until last year, there was not consistent use of novels across all of our high school classrooms. And our teachers were involved in kind of picking out our anchor text. So we only have 4. And so the idea is that gives them more time, that gives them some space to think about their other selections as well.
Okay. I have one thing. Do you pay for AP, SAT, and PSAT testing for RPS students?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that also the case for all of our specialty and the other schools I just mentioned, like Maggie Walker and Code RVA?
For specialty schools, yes, because those are RPS, they're within our footprint.
Right.
For the governor schools, we do not currently have that capability.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Jones?
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Epps, for your presentation. I always enjoy hearing you speak because I feel like I'm getting a behind the scenes look and understanding of what actually happens in the school buildings. And so I appreciate that. That's my comment. And then my question is, but what I wanted to ask was, or what I'm interested in is, when you present here and we have the opportunity to kind of ask questions and you can break down line by line what's happening, how is that information communicated to school administrators, and who communicates it and on what level, and then again, how often? Because I think some of the question answer that we kind of experience is how the information is being disseminated down from the top, and how often and how clear is it? Because I mean, we're all aware of the feedback, with the curriculum and how, and I think you just mentioned it a few minutes ago relative to the preschool, where you said there's parts of the curriculum that's online, but then there's an in-person piece to it. So how is that information being made clear? And when changes are made, how often are you assessing that? So I'd just like a little information on that.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Jones. And thank you for the question. Well, I think first, we can always do better. Instruction is one of those things that we should always be trying to make really clear and simple and streamlined, but also is naturally complex. So a couple things we do. With our school leaders, we do a lot throughout. We're actually beginning to, in the next couple of months, we'll pivot a lot of our conversations to planning for the upcoming year. And so we have cluster meetings through Mr. Hughes' team and my teams. Once a week, we have a few hours with principals at the elementary level and then at the secondary level, where we dig into instructional topics. We'll start that forward-looking in the late spring and all throughout the summer. We do a school leader academy where it's really focused on major efforts for the upcoming year. And then we also have, so that instructionally, our big time is during our cluster meetings. We also have my curriculum team and my academic supports teams. They have kind of point people at their schools who they work closely with as well. So my curriculum instruction team will have department chair meetings with teachers, with our department chairs, or our instructional leads at each school as a teacher who gets a stipend to kind of take information back about curriculum, assessments, things like that. We have a coaches meeting where we train coaches in effective coaching techniques. And then we have a school leader weekly where we give information. But I do think, especially when we're leading big change efforts like a new curriculum, or trying to think about how we want to shift the way we think about assessment and things like that, we need more is always better, and more at every level. And so something I'd like to do more of in the future is have time where I'm also talking more directly with teachers. But like just today, I did a session with our principals where we just dug into the curriculum, and we took a formative assessment that the students would take. So they read the passage and did the work, and then we discussed it and debriefed it. And principals will say, you intend to do that as a school leader, but you don't always have time. So those are some of the things we're doing, but would certainly welcome, more feedback. And from your question, I think it's a really good emphasis to continue to think about how we push that information out.
Yeah, because I think the only other concern was that in building those teams, it's like our students, right? Some people learn at a high level, some people process differently and learn differently. And so when we're pushing something out for everyone at the same time. Everyone's not going to work at the same level. So just finding that middle ground and looking at it not as a win or a loss when everyone is not doing the exact same thing, but understanding
Absolutely.
that everyone's learning at their own pace. And so a high performing, you know, individual or student, you know, is going to test differently than a student that is not at that level. But if we're trying to get everyone to the same place, just be mindful of that. So I always appreciate everything that you share. And again, it's helping me understand the behind the scenes. So I'd love to talk more with it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Mr. Young, do we have anyone else?
Ms. Dorr, then yours truly.
And I'll follow you. Ms. Dorr, go right ahead. The floor is yours.
Ms. Jones / all school board members, you can get on her School Leader Weekly email.
I'll add them.
Yeah. So you can kind of see what's going on, which has been helpful for me. I have two questions. One is related to the leveling and like the time. I know in prior years, it's, I don't even think under this administration, but under previous administrations, the leveling has been very disruptive. And so I wanted to know what our plan is to make sure that we're planning for that now. I mentioned TJ a couple of times, but I do think that there's a need for some leveling, and you know, obviously doing it now is better. So just, and I don't see that leveling in the individual school budgets right now. So wondering, you know, what is the timeline for that, and when can we kind of talk about that? And then you mentioned moving duplicative programs under RAS. I'm really glad to see that. You know, it's been something that we've been talking about as a board. And just sorry if I missed it, but we've talked about as a board kind of making sure that we're not being duplicitous with Aspire, et cetera. So wondering if there are cost savings there and kind of what the status is.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. On the leveling, we're in Miss Lee and Mr. Hughes and myself have a project underway to gather all of the data. This is our school planning team leads this work. And so we're in the process of just validating all of the staff data, validating the student enrollment, and then we're in the process of, you know, looking across scheduling to see, you know, where we have, you know, where we're over or under. In terms of the formal timeline, you wouldn't see that we probably wouldn't reflect that in individual budgets. We would move PCNs as we realize as the leveling is complete. I will, Mr. Hughes, do you have a sense of the formal timeline we've agreed to? I'm sorry, I'm not certain on that one.
No problem, Dr. Epp. And thank you, Ms. Dorr, for the question. And like you said, we do not want to do anything that is disruptive. But in this month, the school planning team will send projected enrollments to all of our school leaders. And we will start the process for validating these projected enrollments, essentially using historical data to determine how many kids we expect to enroll at the schools. That will take place this month. And then we will start course selection at our middle schools and high schools to ensure that the appropriate staffing is in place. And then if we see staffing needs where we have to shift staff from one school to another, this will take place in the month of May, so that by the end of the month, all teachers who will be placed at different schools for the upcoming school year will know. And then of course we will level, and that new staff will be in place at the beginning of the next school year.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. And now I'm blanking on your second question, Ms. Dorr.
Consolidated programs.
Aspire, thank you. So during last budget cycle, from the board's feedback, we actually did condense several positions. So we took advantage of, we made some moves or took advantage of planned vacancies to close out. I believe we closed out at least three positions there. And so under this program, we will be condensing that. And again, when I do my full presentation, I can show you the budget. To do everything we're doing would cost more than 500,000, but we're getting some savings from some of the realignments we're doing. So when we present the more detailed plan, I can show where that savings comes from.
All right, thank you so much. I think, Mr. Young, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, well, first, like Ms. Jones, I have all the confidence in the world in Dr. Epp, and so very grateful she's on our team. She did big things before she came to RPS, and her reputation preceded her. She's doing the same thing here. I also wanted to acknowledge my colleagues who have they're singing from, they perhaps don't know this, but they're singing from Jonathan's hymnal tonight, especially my colleagues in the 2nd, the 5th, and the 6th, as it relates to radical deference for teachers and preferring to always invest in folks in the front line in lieu of central office. Though fond of the folks in central office, I am. So I just make 2 quick points, just really fast, for my colleagues' consideration and for the administration to consider as we go forward in approving the budget. One, I do like Dr. Harris Mohammed's recommendations relevant to custodians and investing dollars, rightfully so, in custodians. But I also would remind everybody, and I know I don't need to, how very passionate I feel about calendar changes, year-round school, the elongated school calendar to include the intersessions, the opt-in intersessions, and we have, as a board, we've talked about our. I think there's some consensus around enthusiasm and support for those intersessions. I think the dispute largely pertains to when we would go live with it. If this coming academic year or the year thereafter, my preference would be this coming year, because candidly, I think it's on us to do everything that we can to catch our students up. But I would point out, for the purpose of this discussion, that we could, if we were if we were in lieu of investing the dollars that we've spoken to this evening for central office for new FTEs, put those monies towards the elongated calendar. We've all acknowledged we'd like to go more than 5,000 students. I mean, we could do considerably more. 350 students. I think for 350 students, that's a lifesaver, perhaps. So just food for thought. That they would be my 2 priorities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I believe Dr. Harris Mohammed is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I knew you were going to go. Dr. Epp, I wanted to follow back up with you. I did categorize every instructional position within your department, as well as every position in Harry Hughes under his purview. And there are, for your department alone, there are about 14 positions that have the same essential duties and responsibilities and the same general description. The job title is different. So I'll be more than happy to send this list that I categorized for you and to the board members and anyone in the public that wants to see it. I'm going to follow the money. And when positions overlap, I'm using the word overlap, but when the chief talent officer, along with any other directors or managers or whomever, select people for these positions, we have to be mindful of them doing the same role. And I also wanted to share with my colleagues that a abundance of confidence does not deter from an abundance of accountability.
I wholeheartedly agree, Dr. Harris Mohammed. And I would love to see that. I will say, prior to us coming here, part of the MOU, job descriptions, some of these roles, job descriptions may have preceded our time, but I would love to see that list, because I think I know what every person in my department does, and would love to validate that. So I want to just, I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense on paper, and would appreciate the due diligence you've done, and I take it to heart. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Young? Anyone else?
It's Miss Burke time.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love this discussion. This is the heart of why we exist. The instructional program is the heart of what we do. And colleagues, Dr. Epp has been very happy to, as we rethink the agenda for each meeting, that we spend more time on the instructional piece. So I'm sure you all, I can tell by the questions tonight as well. And I'm just so happy to see number one, thank you, Dr. Epp. You're on it, you're on it. I can see the difference. Number two, thank goodness we have the listing of those needs that we had from our budget before, but we couldn't finance. So now with the COVID-19 stimulus money, we can. So I'm very happy to hear a lot of this is what Ms. Rizzi's already stated regarding the middle school electives. Happy to see that. The psychologists who spend so much time testing and want to spend more time with our children, in addition to additional psychologists. And we know coming back, we're going to need that. So I'm very happy to see that they can take some of that time away from the testing. And I was disappointed to hear that not every school has an ICC. I don't know how schools are functioning without. I really don't, because that is which helps you to keep your special education program on top of things by having that person in the school. What my question is, I have two questions. Number one, when we think in terms of the curriculum piece, which I'm happy about the books, it makes a difference, and our children do love the opportunity to have that book. And also thinking back to how the SOL testing, not just for the purpose of SOL testing, but the way in which the test is designed, maybe it's changed now, is framed as what you're reading a textbook or a novel or a softback book or whatever. So my question is, number one, what is the role of the VDOE, Virginia Department of Education, and with our MOU that has been in place before this administration, what's the role in place regarding textbooks, support books? How is that done?
Thank you, Ms. Burke. In terms of the question about their role, do you mean funding or selection?
Selection.
Okay. In terms of, so traditionally, most states have, and Virginia's no different, we tend to think about textbooks, but really we've moved generally away from the idea of textbooks into more of curriculum and instructional materials. But textbooks haven't gone away. We've just tried to not think about those as the foundation of teaching, because they're resource materials, but they shouldn't be the heart of it. The state has every year, whenever there's a new standards adoption, so for science, the standards, they've rolled out a new set of standards, and alongside that, the state will have a list of state-approved products. Now, what is on that list may not always reflect what's available in the marketplace or what's even aligned, because not every vendor submits for review, because it can be a cumbersome process, et cetera. So there's a mechanism. If it's already on the state list, every school division still has to go through our own selection process as established by this board, and you all we have a board policy on that, to select from the state list or from the broad marketplace. If it's not on the state list, you would have to procure it separately. If it's on the state list, the price has been negotiated. So in the case of science, for example, we have an RFP out for science curricula that will include items that are on the state list or items that are beyond the state list. And so that's how it works. And then we have to just follow our local policy. And And then with our MOU requires the DOE partnership and prior approval for many different instructional decisions. And so we are in partnership and conversation. Whenever we're taking that on, we're in partnership with the Office of School Quality on those decisions.
Excellent. My second question is, and thank you so much. It's changed a little bit, but not a lot. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. And I believe in hands-on at length and then some, so I'm very happy to hear that. The cohort you spoke of for reading specialists, and you may have stated this before, what's the agreement for those teachers that we are helping to get certified, that we're paying them to get certified? Do they stay so many years, or is there an agreement in place? And if so, I hope there is. What exactly is the agreement?
That's a great question. And I know we were talking about that. I'm gonna phone a friend, my friendly encyclopedia, Miss Udasco, and because she worked with us on that. Do you happen to remember that off the top of your head, Miss Udasco?
I did help draft that. There is, and I can circulate it to the board, there is a provision for the number of years that someone needs to stay in the division, not necessarily at their exact same school, but at the division. I believe it's 3 years after the completion of their degree, or there is payback amounts based on, that's prorated. But I can share the actual promissory note.
Thank you, Michelle.
That's excellent. I appreciate that as well, because they can go anywhere. So we do want to keep them for as long as we can, and we do need reading specialists. My last question is, which will be really for the administration overall, Mr. Cameron, as well. And much of what's being listed regarding the instructional piece, if we decide that collectively. And we're depending upon the COVID funds, the stimulus funds, to support that. So after 2023, what is the plan moving forward financially?
I'm glad to answer that one, Madam Chair, if you would
Please.
like. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So a couple of thoughts. One, the news that Mr. Stanley shared at the top of our meeting is encouraging, because there appears to be potentially more direct aid from the state, which could pay for some of these things. Now, I don't want to oversell this. It certainly would not pay for all of these things, but that would help. And state dollars are recurring dollars, so that would be very helpful. Two, we did reserve a significant amount of money for the 2022-23 school year to be able to maintain a lot of these investments. So as we've discussed as a group, we are not proposing to spend all of the stimulus next year, but saving some of it to be able to maintain some of these investments. Three, I am cautiously optimistic that we will be post-COVID a year from now, that the economy will be rebounding, and that will have positive impacts for city and state revenue, which means likely additional recurring funds. And then on top of that, on my weekly call with my colleagues from around the country via the Great Council of Great City Schools, we discussed the Biden stimulus package, which is making its way through Congress, and it appears the Democrats may use the reconciliation process, which means it will move fairly swiftly and only requires 51 votes. If that's the case, and that is enacted fairly soon, that is an additional batch of money, which the current way the bill is written, we would be able to spend until 2024. So that gives us even a longer runway to continue many of these things as we hope ultimately city and state revenue increase. So I do really think we are actually in a fairly good place to be able to manage all of this, and potentially even more as we think about the extended time and investing. Mr. Young talked about an extra 350 students. Depending on this Biden package, maybe we can increase those intersessions to 7,500 students. And, maybe get to talking about really a third of the school division. And that would be really, really powerful. So for all of those reasons, I do feel comfortable putting this forward to you. If I was deeply concerned about our ability to maintain these investments, I wouldn't. But for all those reasons, I do think we should be okay.
Thank you, Mr. Cameras. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing so much more from.
You're muted, Ms. Burke.
Sorry, thank you so much. Thank you. I was just stating again, thank you so much, Dr. F, for sharing that. I look forward to, our data has no other choice but to get better. We don't have a choice. We do not have a choice. So I'm looking forward to more data and more data. But it also, I'm glad we're going to have people in place to help with that and get that through. So this is the heart. This is the hub. The buck stops here. Instruction. That's why we exist. Thank you so much. Mr. Young, do we have anyone else listed for questions?
We do. Yes, ma'am. Ms. White, Ms. Rizzi, and Ms. Dorr.
All right, Ms. White.
Thank you, Dr. Epps, again. Mine is not a question, it is a comment. And I am so glad that the questions, I've been listening to everyone's question, and I had to come back. At first I said I wasn't coming back, but I do have big concerns. I was listening to Ms. Burke's question, and you answered it, what I really wanted to hear, how you procure the books, the reading books. I have a big concern of that. And while we're talking about intercessions, curriculums, and books, and my concern is based on our children's levels of reading, basic reading, basic math, and basic writing. Those novels, and I have seen them, I got quite a few. I know it's hard for the teachers. I know it is to even, put that curriculum together, that EL curriculum, and trying to, because some of the students, they can't read the material. So I think that we need to go outside of what the state recommends, because I just heard you say that you could actually do a RFP based on the students' needs. We need to start looking at students' needs. If we're going to do an intercession, we're going to give them the same curriculum, the same books. Are we going to their levels? This is what they need to be doing every day, going to their levels, basic. It's far advanced for them. And I have a concern about that, because I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the teachers' lectures every day, and they're trying to fit in. They're doing their part, and they're trying to make it creative. But some of our children is not on that level. And we're having intercessions because we're saying, well, we have to make sure that our children are all on the same level, or this group, 5,000, and I know it's more than 5,000, but the number was 5,000. Mm-hmm. And I think if we're not going to sit there and we're just going to pass by and say, well, summer school, or we're going to extend school for 5,000, and we have more, and we know what we're giving them every day is not working, because they need basic reading, math, and writing. And now they don't do any writing. Mm-hmm. So we need to address that issue, because it's not only hard on the parents, it's hard on the teachers trying to do a lesson plan for children who are not at that level. Now on the state level, they may be at another district, but not right here. We need to look at RPS. And that's what my concerns was the first.
Yes. Ms. White, we might have to recruit you for a reading specialist with your passion for literacy. So you've just described the hardest tension as a teacher responsible for a student who needs to be able to read at their appropriate grade level. Unfortunately, for for some time, students have not been exposed to reading that is at the appropriate level, which is why when they go to take a basic skills test like the SOL, 50% of our students aren't successful yet. And the research, the research is counterintuitive on this. The research says if you keep kids instructing only at their current independent level, they will not grow. You have to actually give them work that is above their level with a lot of support. Think of like a scaffold. In fact, we had a session today with our principals about scaffolds. We read a text and they said my fifth graders aren't able to do that. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because they didn't receive what they really needed. And no, this is not about our teachers. This is about a subpar curriculum. Mm-hmm. They didn't get phonics. 3 years ago, we weren't teaching phonics in K-1-2 consistently. Now, some of our best teachers were, but it wasn't a requirement. That's educational negligence, okay? You have to have phonics. Well, some of our kids never got that. And so what our model is kind of to do what you're saying and sort of what the curriculum we have is, which I believe is what's going to get us there. It is, we've got to give kids access to grade level work, which is the books you're talking about now. But we also have to give them work that's at their level where they can experience success. And they get that during, that's what our interventionists come in for. So during that small group time, they should be getting books that they can read with success on their own. And that's really, and the intersessions, if we are able and lucky enough to go to a year round, the intersessions have to look very differently to get those kids the supports they need. So you're absolutely right. It is a very common dilemma. And so we're trying to kind of meet both of those needs at the same time.
Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that, Dr. Epps. I'm gonna hold it to you.
Yes, ma'am. Keep asking the questions. I love it. Thank you.
I'm going to say something just before Ms. Rizzi, if I may. Level book rooms. We used to have level book rooms. If a child was in the 3rd grade, but unfortunately was struggling and was reading on the 1st or 2nd grade level, they could take those books home, or a tutor could spend time with them to help build them up. As Ms. White just stated, the basics. So is that still available? Is there still some, does teachers or students still have?
Ms. Burke, that was one of the benefits from our prior curriculum. We had leveled libraries in every classroom.
Yes.
And so we kept those. We didn't just throw it out. We encouraged schools and teachers to keep those. And we can certainly, a lot of our schools, Dr. Harris Muhammad had asked about some Title I, where some of our Title I dollars go. Now schools get to decide based on their school-wide plan how they want to use those dollars. And a lot of times schools will use their school-wide dollars for leveled libraries. And I think a lot of our schools have them. I'm sure we could, do a check to see who needs more.
Please.
But yeah, absolutely. We can look into that.
Thank you. Ms. Rizzi? You're next.
I was trying to unmute myself with my mouse over here with my other computer, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
So, questions here. As a long time, language arts, reading / English person who's taught at every level, I've taught from the middle to high school. I think it's a little harsh to call the move away from phonics negligence, just because there was a pedagogical move, like a complete move in the field away from teaching phonics and more into sight words and, context clues and things like that, right? I didn't like it, but it was definitely like a nationwide move away from phonics. So I don't think we can blame RPS or anybody for that. That was a definitely, it was a move that the actual, people who were language arts specialists at the time suggested, and many schools went with that. And so I think it's a little mean to call it negligence. Our teachers didn't have a choice. And so You know, I hope now with this EL, and I think this is time to address this. There's kind of a groundswell I'm sensing from teachers who are contacting me and talking among each other about how ELL and the math are not, can you guys hear me because you've frozen?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can
We
you
can
hear
hear you, Ms. Rizzi.
Okay.
Yes, we hear you
How they
fine.
are
You're
not
fine.
necessarily aligned with the Virginia standards, and a lot of our teachers are saying that they are feeling like they have to teach 2 different curriculums in order to make sure that the students will do well when it comes to, you know, testing. And so that I think is a legitimate concern that we need to think about. I don't know if these interventionists plan to deal with this with our teachers, but I mean, it's starting to, you know, swell. I'm starting to hear more and more about this from our educators in our schools. So, you know, and scaffolding is something that a lot of teachers just, you know, they don't necessarily think about it. They just do it. I mean, I do it after years of teaching. I know you have to start with this, build, 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 and you'll get a student to where you want them to be. So I think we can talk to our teachers more about that and allow our teachers to actually create this scaffolding, give them the leeway to do it in ways that are intuitive for them. And also, like, let's really address this situation with the EL language arts and the math and make sure that they align with the Virginia standards. I'm starting to really believe that there's an issue with that.
Thank you, Ms. Rizzi. First, as I said, I don't blame our teachers about phonics instruction. 20 years ago, the National Reading Panel issued an entire study about the science of reading. So at least for 20 years, I'll say the broad education sector, not just RPS. So I apologize if my words were less precise. What I will say unequivocally, the ELA and math curriculum are aligned and above the level of rigor, cognition, knowledge, and skills that our students need to succeed on the state SOL. I will stand behind that statement, and any teacher that I've dug in and worked with, and we've worked through it, has seen that. What we're dealing with is a natural grappling. Whenever you're changing into a new way of doing things, we are dealing, it's very natural, and we're trying to normalize this, that it's okay to grapple. It's okay to ask questions. We went through this with principals today, doing the work ourselves. And as one of our principals so eloquently said, I couldn't have said it better. He said, looking at what this curriculum is asking our kids to do, let me say, he said, I'm a New Yorker, and if I can drive in New York, I can drive anywhere. And that really is the guiding principle with both of these curricula. These curricula, I think our teachers, unfortunately, have been given so many mixed messages about focusing on the test. And it's not fair for them to feel that pressure. We want them to create that scaffolding. That is the work. That is the preparation work. So rather than creating from scratch every day, we want them to do that thing that only they can do, that they know with their kiddos. But we're in the midst of grappling with something new with our teachers. And I appreciate that folks are expressing the concern. I will stand behind both of these curricula, having looked at them, used them, played with them, studied them with our teachers. I want to disabuse folks of the idea that this is not aligned to the state standards. It is aligned and then some. And we have developed tools and resources and the specialists that are at central office working with our academic architects. Those are our teacher leaders that this board invested in as part of our strategic plan to pay our teacher leaders to help build connective tissue with our curricula. And those folks who get that, they know that, and they've built correlation charts. So I'd be happy, and for all of our teachers watching, our teachers know that they can contact me and we can dig in. It helps me. I learn every time I talk with a teacher to help them see where they're stuck. It's not that a teacher shouldn't have that question. I'm grateful they have that question. I just want, I want to be clear with everyone that the question right now is not about alignment. The question is, it's really hard. And we're adapting, and that's what we're wrestling with. And I want to normalize that for our teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Epps, so much. It's almost 8 o'clock. Colleagues, do we have anyone else, Mr. Young, listed?
Yes, ma'am. 2 to go.
Okay.
Ms. Dorr and Dr. Harris Muhammad.
All right, so we'll have Ms. Dorr, Dr. Harris Muhammad, then we'll have Mr. Cameron to close us out. Ms. Dorr?
My question is regarding next steps and next meetings, et cetera. These sessions have been very helpful and for us to kind of information gather, but I am mindful of gathering lots of information and then not arriving at the next step. And so I feel a little anxious because I feel like we've been gathering and gathering and then asking for more information, then gathering and gathering, but we haven't given the administration direction on what changes we want to see to the budget, if any. And so I'm wondering if you could help me, or you could help us understand kind of what the process is in terms of how we get feedback to the administration, if we have any, and how we move forward on gaining consensus around some of these items. I know some folks have been advocating for custodial staff. Some folks want to dig in a little bit more to year-round school, et cetera. So just want to make sure that we're kind of driving some of these discussions to some next steps.
Thank you so much. You are on point, and it's been quite interesting. It really has been. I've really appreciated the questions, the discussion, and it helps us as a board as well. Mr. Cameron, would you like to respond to that? What your timeline is? That's next week, isn't it?
Sure. Well, we do have our meeting on the 16th. I believe it's on the 16th, right?
That's
okay.
correct.
You know, the original goal was to vote at that time. You know, I do think we could, if the board felt like they needed a little bit more time, the board could adopt, for example, or rather approve the recurring pieces of the budget so that we can get that squared away and sent off to the mayor's office, which must be done by the 19th. And it requires us about 48 hours to get everything organized paperwork wise to get that over to the mayor's office. So I would not want to delay on that. The board could also approve portions of the ESSER federal stimulus spend plan. I would strongly encourage the board to do so, particularly on things like the facilities section, so that we can get that application over to the state. They can approve it, then we can get our money, and then we can start spending on the things we know we need to spend on to reopen. We could perhaps hold on a couple of pieces of the ESSER if the board felt like they needed more time. For example, we have 8 million set for extended year. We could keep that chunk allocated for additional instructional time, but continue to talk about exactly how we use those funds. And if there are other things that the board feels like they need more time to wrestle with, we could kind of put those in a bucket to say, hey, everything else is approved, but we want to keep talking about those 2 or 3 things. So again, to summarize, I would say, I think approving the recurring funding, which really is just the raise, the step, the healthcare, and the tuitions for the governor's schools and other schools on the 16th would help us get that to the mayor so that we can make sure we're squared away with the city. I would also encourage the board to approve the facilities and any other parts of the federal stimulus they feel comfortable with, so we can get that application over to the state so that we're not the reason we haven't gotten the money from the state. And then if there are pieces that the board feels like they want to keep talking about, we could put those in a bucket and say, all right, I know there was a conversation about another meeting on the 18th, potentially. Maybe we could handle those then or the next week. That would be my recommendation, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Muhammad?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. My final point. Dr. Ebb, you and I are right here with bold and curriculum that stretches our teachers. Been an educator for 30 years, and I love everything about curriculum. Never preach teaching to a test, teaching through the test. But when the curriculum is not directly aligned to how the SOL, and I don't know how teachers, I know how they're emailing me and how they're saying it. And what I want to think is that they mean that when it comes to the standards of learning tests for that content area and the curriculum in which the board before us adopted, they don't mesh. And if they don't mesh, and we're teaching kids through the test of how it looks in Virginia, and then we're teaching them to a curriculum that doesn't mirror what they are assessed on, you have to be open to hear their concerns. But I'm with you. I am definitely with you in believing that alignment needs to stretch our children. I'm glad you also mentioned the Title I funding, because I have yet, and the board have yet to receive what the spend up and spend down money that is. So please make sure we get that, Mr. Cameron, because we're talking about equity. We want to make sure that these interventionists and these specialists are where they need to be. To Ms. Doerr's point, this is why I sent a detailed email asking if we could have consideration to vote on this budget later in the week of next week. Mr. Cameron has explained that there are certain pieces that his office wants to get to the mayor's office, and I respectfully understand that, and I support that. But these other facets of this budget, and I have to say this, and I'm gonna say it professionally, if we can get the detailed information that we request that helps us with the budget. I've only been on this board since January the 4th. And I took my time to categorize positions that have the same description. That's not my job, but I'm trying to help govern and move the district forward because I believe in the division. That's why I was called to this. So we need to help each other in ensuring that we get what we need so we can make these decisions that deal with money in our budget. So if the board members don't, are not inclined to move the date to vote on the other pieces of the budget, I respectfully accept that. But I can't stand with a budget that's not complete and detailed, and we don't know exactly where things are going, and there's information that's missing. And I appreciate I really appreciate every presentation that has ever been presented to us. Just because I don't say it doesn't mean that I don't mean it. And just because I ask questions does not mean that I don't appreciate it. It's called accountability. It's not a lack of confidence. It's called accountability. And so I'm expecting that. Thank you.
So Dr. Harris Muhammad, and maybe we can take is everybody either give me thumbs up or thumbs down regarding what Mr. Cameron just stated regarding splitting everything up, which sounded great to me, a chunk at a time, because it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. It is a lot. So are you all in agreement on the 16th voting on just the part that goes to the city? And then we will, and the part with the facilities of which we need to address, and then continue this conversation, which I think has been very, very, very helpful in making a great decision. Can you give me thumbs up if you, or do you want to meet on the, Dr. Muhammad said yes per chat. Thank you, that's good documentation. So if you all are in favor on the 16th of splitting it, as he just stated, can you give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, please? All right, the majority thumbs up. Is there anything else to address?
No.
Have a happy Valentine's weekend, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Good night.